through this door lies another dimension. One of beeps, one of boops. A reality where 8-bit and HD clash. This is the point where new and retro meet. The 6.5 dimension, protected by the arcade overlord. You have crossed into the turbo zone.
Great scouts. You can smell them from 50 yards away. So here we are. And just think, the captain wanted me to stay and set up camp. I didn't join the Freeborn Blades to stack pots and regular trains.
Does every game need to be this big AAA blockbuster? Does every game need to be Uncharted or God of War or whatever big thing is huge at the time? You know, does every RPG need to be Skyrim? I remember back in the days of, say, the PS2 or the N64, where you would get these lower budget games by companies like Midway, THQ, Acclaim, like companies that would bring you games that weren't the big players. You know, games by Midway were not the big players on the PS2. Sure, the Mortal Kombat games were big, but I mean, there's games like The Suffering that were really different, and really, they didn't have the biggest budgets, but they tried different things. I feel like in this environment is gone. It's either you're making a digital indie game, or you're making a big AAA blockbuster that has to sell millions of copies to be successful. And it's a really sad time to play games because that middle ground is gone for the most part.
Thou hast fled.
What the?
Thou didst hold the power to face the necromancers, yet thou didst flee.
I had no choice.
No choice. Hast thou even thought of choosing? Thou art fled like a thief, and thou hast left me, the shadow of myself, trapped here in this prison.
Bound by Flame is what I consider to be part of that middle ground, and you don't see a lot of games like this nowadays, but the PS4 does have a little crop here and there. This game is brought to us from Focus Home Interactive, who do release these types of games, and the game is by a studio named Spiders. And Spiders makes a bunch of other games you might have played. I think their most recent game was the Technomancer. But Bound by Flame is an action RPG, and like more akin to something like Dragon Age. Now, looking at this game from a visual level, you can clearly tell that it did not have the biggest budget. But does that make a bad game? I don't think so. Yes, the graphics aren't the best on the PS4. Yeah, the locations and environments aren't the greatest things in the world, but everything else in the game is really cool. The story presented is really cool. You play as a hero named Vulcan, who he's a mercenary working for these people called the Red Scribes, and through this course of events, he ends up getting this demon trapped inside of him. And as you play the game, your choices decide whether you're going to give in to the demon and become a little more evil, or if you're going to resist the demon and become good. It kind of reminds me of like the original Fable in a way. And as you play, your choices will affect your character and the story on both a narrative and visual level. It's really, really cool. I've played a lot of games that claim they changed, like the whole game changes by your choices. But this game, as you're playing, you can clearly tell that it really does. While the voice acting isn't that great, the actual narrative of the game is pretty fun, and I do like some of the characters. The main character, Vulcan, is voiced by Robert Atkin Downes, who voices characters like No More Heroes, Travis Touchdown, and the game has some really interesting side quests and plot development as you play along.
Now I've seen everything. The Deadwalkers kicking each other's asses.
I beg your pardon?
What? This one talks. What the hell are you, a lich? A zombie scribe?
We've only known one another a few seconds, and already you insult me. Charming, I must say.
You're in my way.
I'm only showing up to like 6 hours in here because I really don't want to spoil the ending half of the game. I think playing a big, like part of the hook of playing a big RPG like this is to really experience it for yourself. And the game's only about 12, 13 hours long. So I'm only showing the first few areas of the actual game. One of the other really cool aspects of this game is its RPG elements. This game is really customizable. I mean, the character himself isn't really that customizable. You can pick the faces and the hair, but everything else is. You can there's all kinds of different trees you could choose. You could use the warrior class, we use big weapons. You can use stealth class and use the smaller daggers. You can focus your power on like your fire necromancer. Pyromancer fire powers, that you get from your demon. You can really customize all that, along with buying new armor and equipment, and really customizing what your character's perks are. If they're good at crafting, if they're good at fighting, if they're good at sneaking, you can really customize your character to your playstyle, and it makes leveling up and doing all that really, really intriguing.
I wouldn't expect him to admit to keeping a woman captive in the swamps for his own evil purposes.
Nonsense.
And so you just trotted out here with no escort. What, were you afraid we'd charge you extra?
I came here as quickly as possible, yes, to stop you committing a grievous error. I was hoping that you would escort us back to the village afterwards. Without a supplement, yes. Seems to me that you are quite well paid.
And the combat system itself is pretty enjoyable. I'll admit, at first, it took me a little while to get used to it, but the whole system, which I played as the warrior class, mostly with the big weapons, because I like using big weapons in games like these. So, parrying and knowing when to strike is really key in the combat system, and you can't really you can't just mash buttons and hack away. You really got to know how to time and how to get in there. It's pretty tactical, and after you get used to it, it's really fun. The game's also got a really nice soundtrack, and Bound by Flame, I think, is just a really underrated game. I think most of the reviewers that played this game didn't play past the first hour, to be honest. I mean, most of the reviews I've seen only use footage from like the first 2 hours of the game, and there's a lot more game than that. I think people that reviewed the game, even people that I like Derek from Classic Gamer, they just played the opening act, saw that it was pretty low budget, saw that it wasn't as visually stimulating or as big and grand as, say, Skyrim or Dragon Age, and decided to say it was bad. And I don't think that's fair, because why the hell would you compare a game like this with a really low budget to something like Skyrim, which had an incredibly high budget? Why the fuck would you do that? It's really stupid. Bound by Flame is really good. Bound by Flame is a really underrated game. It's rough around the edges, but what is there is done really well, and you can tell that Spiders put a lot of time and effort into making this game as good as they possibly could at the time. And I'm really excited to play their other games, like Technomancer. I mean, it's just, I think this type of game is kind of gone. There's a few games like this, like Focus also published The Surge, which is a really middle ground type game like this. And these games need to exist, because back in the day, before a game became really popular, it was this type of middle ground game. Not all games start out as huge, multi-million-dollar, high-budget AAA action fest. Back in the day, most games started out in the middle and had to earn their way to the top. It's just how things worked.
You live. Your mother and I are so relieved to know you live. Mother? But how can I release you from this curse? My son, if you only knew how sorry we are. You cannot save us. We are condemned to this abomination. You must slay us. The others, the Queen, the Count, all of these people. I feel their suffering.
So, if you see Bound by Flame, this game doesn't cost a whole lot. I think when I bought it back in 2016 or so, it was like $13. So it might be even cheaper now. It's really cheap. If you want a good, fun RPG to play on the PS4, it's also on like the Xbox 360 and PS3. Bound by Flame.
Black Frost made a serious mistake, and his trap will be the end of him.
There are 6 ritual spears planted in my flesh. Black Frost is but one of them. How much longer must I endure this charade? Hasten you to rejoin with me.
I will return to the World Heart when I'm ready. This necromancer is an obstacle that cannot be ignored.
No, I have had enough of this prison, of this sacrilege, of this servitude. How dare thee leave me thus? Thou art no better than they.
Wake up, Vulcan. This is not the moment.
Hey geeks and gamers, TurboBot90013 here. Remember to subscribe to the Turbo Zone for more content. The Arcade Overlord, thank you. Stay retro. Turbo Zone.